Changing minds one thought at a time.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Changing Minds online call. Tonight is our special night. It is our first Sunday Superstar call. Good evening, Akina. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing wonderful. How about yourself, Jessica?
I'm doing awesome, thank you. Just been really feeling this holiday season spirit, and for those of you who may know, we have a project going on right now at Changing Minds Online where we're going to be bringing some Christmas presents to some homeless shelters on Christmas Eve in New York City. So we have a link up on our Facebook. I just want to thank everyone who's sent gifts so generously off of our Amazon wish list. We have very close to the 200 gifts now that we're looking for. So just want to thank all of our listeners who are participating in that. I've had some amazing gifts coming our way from people that I have not met, but I want to thank you in advance for your generosity and support. Tonight is a special night as well. We have on a special guest tonight talking about a topic which is really near and dear to my heart. Tonight we are welcoming Dr. Elisha Goldstein onto our call. And he's really an incredible individual. I was first connected with Dr. Goldstein by reading one of his blog articles on meditation, or a published article in a journal on meditation and mindfulness. And for me, mindfulness is just so important. And I've been studying and practicing meditation for 16 years now. And I'm really just honored to have Dr. Goldstein on our call. He's the co-founder of the Center for Mindful Living in Los Angeles. Published author. He has several books. The last one in Uncovering Happiness, and he just let me know that about his basic mindfulness meditation, a 28-day challenge, which I can't wait to get started on. Sounds really amazing. Dr. Goldstein has been a pioneer in the field of mindfulness. He piloted a program about mindfulness at work and won the through Aetna using his program, actually won the National Business Health Award. So, absolutely qualified and unequivocally qualified individual to speak to us tonight about mindfulness, about meditation. Dr. Goldstein, it's an honor to welcome you on our call tonight.
It's so great to be here. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, we honored you tonight as our first Sunday Superstar. And the reason that we chose to honor you tonight as our Superstar is, you are an amazing individual. You have a published author, several programs. You opened your own center. You've done a lot, and a lot of people on this call are really looking to make a great change in our lives. And we just would love to just ask you, how did you accomplish all these wonderful things?
Well, I think, it's kind of like a story of trauma, from trauma to transformation in some way. I think a lot of people find themselves through the difficulties they have in their life, and it was probably about almost 20 years ago, where it was the .com high, and I was living up in San Francisco, working hard and playing much harder, and really lost and confused, and at the same time successful in the corporate world. And a lot of people who have struggled with substance abuse can maybe relate to this to some way, where it's really confusing if you're doing good enough, and yet you're kind of lost in life around substance use. And that was kind of my story. I was kind of doing things that were absolutely not good for me, and it came to the darkest and deepest moment of my life. I'd say it's pretty hard. It's pretty easy for me to say what the lowest point of my life is, where I was in the South of Market in San Francisco, and I was with a guy in the back of his broken down limousine. A guy that I told my friends, if you ever catch me with this guy, you'll know to kind of pull me out. And that's when I had a family intervention around that time. But in that moment, in that broken down limousine, I had like an aha moment. I had a moment of waking up where I said, I don't need to live this way. And it really was through that, being able to look at that pain and suffering, that I saw the light. And the light was that I need to reconnect to what matters in my life. And so I started doing what a lot of people on the other end of this call and you guys have probably done, which is started to, collect books and read books and seek out people in the field who can teach me something about, how to live well. And I did that, and that's when I kind of inevitably went back to after that, like family intervention. I went to like this month-long retreat for adults, and it was there where I came across a guy who taught me how to mindfully eat an orange. And so this is something that seems so simple, and yet it was so incredibly profound to me for him to say, can you just kind of pay attention to eating this orange as if for the very first time? And I thought he was kind of nuts, and I didn't really want to do that. And he said, just entertain this for a moment, and I did. And when I kind of brought this orange to my senses, what happened was that my whole body started to relax. I started to see things that I never knew were there before, like the zest when you kind of peel off the orange, or the membranes in the flesh of the orange. And he said after, and the taste of the orange was better than I'd ever tasted anything in my life before. And he asked me, what afterwards, because I was so surprised by all these findings, what would the days, weeks, and months ahead be like if there was more of this kind of ability to be present to your life, living as if it kind of mattered, paying attention to it. And that really woke me up, and I wanted more of that. And so I started, I went back to school. I left the corporate world. I went back to school at a place called at the time called the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. It doesn't exist anymore. I chose that school particularly because it integrated mindfulness into its curriculum, and it surrounded me with people. I think the biggest thing, one of the biggest takeaways I have about how to change, bad habits, how to go get what you want and be successful with it, is to surround yourself with people who are going to support you with that. And so when I went back to school, I had a lot of those people around me, and so I left a group of people that weren't as helpful for me, and I started, getting trained in mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is one of the foremost programs out there in the secular field of mindfulness. Pretty much most of the research that we find, most of the neuroscience that we find out there in mindfulness, just to kind of define that, mindfulness just means awareness, really, just being aware of what's here, being in the present moment. But the actual action of it, how we train our brain in it, is intentionally paying attention to various things in our life with a beginner's mind, with a sense of curiosity. In other words, kind of putting aside the program biases that are there, this is good or bad or right or wrong or fair and unfair, and we just engage things fresh and new, so we give ourselves the opportunity to kind of see things clearly and make choices about, do I want this in my life, do I not want this in my life? And so I started getting trained in this and more formally, and I met this guy, Bob Stahl, who inevitably was on my dissertation committee at when I did my doctoral thesis on something called sacred moments, which is I created a 5-minute intervention, which was just training people to be present for 5 minutes while in relationship with some kind of something that was meaningful in their life. It could have been an object, it could have been a memory, or something like that. And then I had another group do journaling, and another group not do anything. And so Bob Stahl was one of the foremost teachers in mindfulness-based stress reduction outside of UMass Medical Center, which is where John Kabat-Zinn started mindfulness-based stress reduction. And so I put him on my dissertation committee, and then I inevitably got trained with him in mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I had a great idea at that time. I was working with a company in Auckland, New Zealand, that I had met through this kind of process I was telling you about earlier, which was reaching out to people and finding like-minded people or other people in the area who were doing the things I wanted to do. And they were doing something where they were creating a back-end software program that took people who had programs like mindfulness-based stress reduction or various programs and put them online. And they were a little ahead of their time, so they didn't end up. They ended up kind of, going out of business. But at the time, I told Bob that we should put this online, and he and I created a skeleton for mindfulness-based stress reduction online, and inevitably the powers that be in the MBSR world, mindfulness-based stress reduction, weren't ready for that. But what we did was we created a skeleton for a really powerful program, and that's how we inevitably wrote together. We co-authored the mindfulness-based stress reduction workbook. So that was the very first book that I'd ever written. And some things that I was doing before that, by the way, as I was trained as an MBSR teacher, and I was leading mindfulness groups, and I went and worked for Kaiser and started mindfulness groups there. I guess I was very proactive in asking people, can I do this? Can I start this? Because back then, when you got trained as an MBSR teacher, the suggestion was go out now and do this. Go out and teach this. That's how you kind of learn the most, by doing that. And so I did. And I started creating CDs. I created a mindful solution series for stress, anxiety, depression, for addiction, and relapse prevention, and for at work. And that's how the Mindfulness at Work program was inevitably born, because I created that CD program on it. And eMindful, who's a fantastic online company, who is the foremost online company for delivering live, interactive mindfulness programs out there right now, sought me out, and they asked me if I would build a Mindfulness at Work program for them, and that's what I did. And that got picked up by Aetna. I had nothing to do with that, but that got picked up by Aetna, and they sold it all to their corporate clients, and inevitably that's how that won that award. So I've been really lucky in a lot of ways with connecting with really good people, but I wouldn't say it's only luck, because I sought out these people and I guess took risks to say yes and go alongside them and build things for them and with them, and as I did that, I just kind of got used to. I think also as a doctoral student, you get used to working for free, because when you're doing your internships or your postdoctoral work, you don't really get paid much, and so it was no sweat off my back to take risks to go work on books or work on programs that I wasn't going to get paid for. I didn't know if I was going to get paid for it, because I was used to not getting paid for things anyway. But the payoff in that is that, if they're successful, then kind of gets you out there more, and more people get to be impacted and affected by the work that you're doing, which is great. And so, that kind of parlayed itself to working on my own book, The Now Effect, because what I was interested in was how do you take the MBSR program, basically, and make it into something that, for a book, is bite-sized, doable, shorter, and something that can integrate into people's everyday lives. And so that's how that book was born. So I never really wrote that, and then had a lot of experiences working with people who had a fear of flying, and so wrote a very much shorter book called Mindfulness Meditations for the Anxious Traveler. And meanwhile, this whole time, while I was a trained mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher, I also had an interest in depression, a lot of depression in my family and my world, and as a psychologist, also it made sense, and that you can marry these two. And so I was already working with mindfulness and some cognitive behavioral therapy techniques for depression, and then I had heard about that there was this program called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for depression, and so I inevitably got trained in that and I brought the first mindfulness-based cognitive therapy class to Los Angeles and inside LA with a colleague of mine, Roger Nolan, and we started teaching that together about over 7 years ago now. And so I got a lot of experience working with mindfulness and depression, and I started realizing that there are some things that are so important when it comes to helping people not relapse into depression. And when you look at a lot of the neuroscience behind it, there are some things that activate parts of the brain that we need activated, and we need to work on to kind of create what I call an antidepressant brain. And that's what spurred this whole book called Uncovering Happiness, which lays out these kind of natural antidepressants we have and how we can kind of literally change our brain to create this antidepressant brain. And so you get once you start writing, you get used to writing, and so it just became kind of a way of life to see people individually, to teach classes, to work with groups, to write blogs. It's kind of like a practice. To so many other stories in here, but I don't want to bore everyone with them. But but this is kind of just how it happens. You say yes, you go after it, You spend time. You make time to proactively plan and vision. What is it? And this is what I did that I'm wanting. What am I wanting? How do I want to see this unfold? And how is it going to unfold practically? So I guess it wasn't all serendipity, like luck. I did kind of strategically take time to think about, what am I wanting? I'm wanting to write this book. I'm wanting to, write these blogs. I'm wanting to see people individually. I'm wanting to do these groups. How is this all kind of going in the same direction of supporting people and living the life they want to live? Meanwhile, it helps me surround myself in that world of mindfulness, of being present to my life and the purpose that is inherent in that. And I would say that's kind of where things have gone. And I'm lucky enough to have married a woman who's very supportive of that, and we met our very first day of graduate school, and she's also a trained MBSR teacher, and so we have that value together, and it's great that we can work together and create the CALM program, Connecting Adolescents to Learning Mindfulness, and that we can do that, and that we can co-found the Center for Mindful Living together. I mean, so yeah, I'm a lucky guy in that way, and so that's kind of how that all unfolded.
Wow, that is a powerful story. And you mentioned your Center for Mindfulness. Tell the audience about how they could get involved in your center.
Well, the center is just launching right now, and so the website's not even up yet. So basically, what it's going to be is it's basically a center for mindfulness and psychotherapy. There's individual work done there. There's a sliding scale, but you don't really see in LA very much, or you see it certainly, but you don't see it as much in the mindfulness world, I guess, as like a sliding scale type of therapy, with that. And we want to make sure that a lot of people that this is available to a lot of people. And so then that's the individual part. We're going to have groups, workshops, and classes that are aimed at integrating mindfulness for anxiety, depression, addictive behaviors, grief, insomnia, all of these different things. So there's not a place in LA currently that's an actual center integrates as a focus mindfulness and psychotherapy as for group work and individual work. And so we thought there was a real need for that, and there's always been a vision of ours. And so that's what we're in the course of launching as we speak. So doors are open, but there's no website yet. There's no none of that's happening. But it'll probably be more like towards the beginning of next year, where people will start seeing more of the groups popping up and more of the website and all that.
Now, will this be available for only people in Los Angeles, or will it be available worldwide?
I'm glad you asked that, because the part of the vision is that this will be the Center for Mindful Living will be something that will have local. It'll be local, so it is a brick and mortar local place, but that will also be doing live streaming for our workshops and classes and these types of things, so that it'll be available to people who are not in Los Angeles as a live interactive type of component. But that's where that's at right now. So that's part of the vision. It's not happening immediately, but that's certainly something we want to happen. As I do that anyway, with either classes or seminars and stuff like that. A lot of that happens live online at times anyway.
Wonderful.
So very good. So now you brought up mindfulness about being this, awareness or intentionality of what you're doing and being in that moment and being very present. For some of our listeners who may not have experienced mindfulness before, in the sense that they don't really know what it is or why it's important, how does mindfulness play a role in our lives, and how is it of value to people?
Well, it's a good question. There's a lot of debate around that right now in our culture. I mean, ever since probably a little over a year ago, mindfulness was on the cover of Time magazine, and 2 months ago. It was on the cover of Atlantic Monthly. So it's you got a number of New York Times bestsellers now that are mindfulness books. So it's certainly hitting mainstream. You get more and more people who are public figures talking about it now, and so there's a lot more media about it than ever. But the reality is everybody has experienced mindfulness before, the ability to be present in their life. So it's not something that's foreign to anybody, and yet there's a practice. A formal and informal practice that's very pragmatic, practical, and that we can integrate into our lives to basically strengthen our sense of personal control, our self-confidence, that we can kind of handle things that come our way in our life. Because what happens is, as we're born in this world, we have our genetics, and at the same time our brains are learning. They're out to learn how to respond to things, moment to moment. So like 95% of our life, we're, I hate to say it, but we're kind of automatons in some way, where our brain is making decisions for us. You see if you're someone that likes McDonald's, you see a McDonald's sign, or you have a thought of McDonald's, and you turn in to get a Big Mac or whatever you want, the great fries that they have, and you think it's because you're choosing to do that, but really what's happening is dopamine squirting up in your brain, and it's motivating you in a certain direction to do that based on certain histories and experiences that you've had in your life, and so you're kind of being driven to do things all the time, moment to moment. So mindfulness basically says, like, hold on a second, I'm going to pause for a moment, and I'm going to pay attention. Is this what I want? And it helps us, in other words, wake up and not be so enslaved by our past programming or our past reactive patterning that we've grown up with in our life. And it helps us gain a sense of personal control in our life to say, oh, yeah, no, actually I don't want to get on this social media right now. I'd rather, put it down and go for a walk or be with my kids. Or, flipping through channels is not really helping me right now. I'm waking up and I'm in this moment, and I'd rather go and journal or draw or whatever we want to do. It gives you a sense of kind of really paying attention to life as if it mattered. And so there's that, as I was saying, there's formal practices to it where you're actually setting time aside to be guided in a particular practice that has you pay attention to something, whether it's your breath, your body, sounds, or any number of your senses. And the purpose of that is to kind of train your ability to be here, and also to be aware of how your mind works really reactively. And so you don't need to be enslaved by it. If you start to get some understanding on how your mind works, when we pause for a second, just pay attention, we see how our mind is just reacting automatically. We don't need to be so driven by it. And so it allows us that freedom, maybe for the first time in our life, to be able to choices from a more conscious space with the awareness that we're being driven by certain automatic thought patterns. And so inevitably, it helps us just feel a little bit more in control. We inevitably become a little bit kinder. We become a little bit happier. We become less stressed because we feel a greater sense of personal control, which is the opposite of when someone's feeling anxious or depressed. And so I'm not saying mindfulness is a panacea, but what I am saying is that it certainly helps, and the reason it helps us feel that sense of personal control. And that's the reason it's mainstreaming so much. So it's not like just a fad. It's people are having experiences and saying, like, this is really good. And the key is to find good teachers with this, because there's a lot of people, when something gets really popular, a lot of people take hold of it and just want to kind of make money off of it. And the idea is that you just want to find someone who knows what they're doing, who has good experience with it, and whose work you connect with, and then to kind of bring it into your life. Nothing's going to trump experience. And so the idea is to bring the experience into your life, and then use your own experience to be your guide, your judge. And that's what I write about in all my books, is that, don't just read this. You try it on to see what you think. Don't take my word for it. See what you think, and notice how this impacts your life or in this moment. And because ultimately we have a lot of wisdom within us. It's just about pausing for a moment to be able to be guided and how to tap into it, so that we can become our own therapist, our own teacher, our own guru in some way.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Goldstein, for being on the show today. And do you have one thing you would like for the listeners to take away?
Well, I think one thing that hit me so much when I heard it was a quote from a guy who is not in the mindfulness field or anything like that, but certainly someone who experienced a lot of trauma in their life and made some incredible meaning out of it, Viktor Frankl. And he has a quote that's been attributed to him that was the basis of what the Now Effect was written on, and certainly is one of the bases for uncovering happiness too, which is, between stimulus and response there's a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. What mindfulness allows us to do is tap into that space between stimulus and response where choice lies, choice, possibility, perspective. And as we intentionally practice and repeat something over and over again, it starts to become more automatic. And so, for the listeners, what would the days, weeks, and months ahead be like if there was more experiences of being present to choice, possibility, and perspective? And that's really what it is, and that's really all there for you and possible. And I encourage you to reach out to me. You're welcome to always email me and ask questions, Elisha@ElishaGoldstein.com. Or you can just go to my website, ElishaGoldstein.com, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, and I'll get back to you. And I look forward to hearing from anyone on this call who has any questions about this stuff.
Yes, we also have the link for your new book and your Basics of Mindful Meditation on our Facebook page if any of the listeners need that, to reach out to you as well.
Yep, that's great.
Thank you for sharing with us so generously tonight, and for really just letting our listeners reach out to you. We really appreciate that, and we appreciate your time on the call tonight.
Oh, yeah, it's great, and I'm glad you guys have this show and that it can hopefully be a benefit to many people.
Thank you. So thank you, and I thank everyone who called in tonight, and just acknowledge you. Obviously, if you're on this call, that you have taken a stand to take your life to the next level, and we're proud of you, and we're excited to be part of your journey. So thank you to Dr. Goldstein. Thank you to all of our listeners. We love you guys. God bless, and have a great evening.
Yes, thank you, everyone.